afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Redberry Wheel here, and today we're going to be talking about delegation. Delegation is pretty cool, and it is very useful to understand the appropriate steps in order to properly delegate a task to someone else. Now, this is in Chapter 11 of the Learn to Lead books, and I will leave a link in the description if you would like to look at the material. It's on page 120 of the Learn to Lead books. See? Fantastic. Alrighty then. Today I will be discussing a few different things about delegation. First of all, what is delegation? What are the steps associated with delegation? And then the last part of it is, what is the vital shift? So we're going to be talking about a few of those things, and then maybe talk a little bit about overcoming challenges that are associated with delegation. So let's jump right into it. Delegation is basically where the leader assigns the responsibility and the authority to a follower in order to complete a task. For example, when I'm doing a team project for my game design classes, I might ask someone on my team, hey, would you be willing to create this art asset? Can you make this 2D sprite for me? Can you create something nice like this? Or asking for a piece of concept art, anything like that. So take a moment to think about a time that you have been delegated something. Alright, delegation happens all the time, because if you don't delegate, then you're doing a lot of stuff. So another example, like some popular YouTubers, they don't edit their videos sometimes. They have someone else edit them. Like I don't have the money or the resources to hire someone to edit, but those larger YouTubers and those companies, they have someone specifically to edit those videos. They have delegated that authority and that responsibility to make sure that those videos are cut down to be more entertaining, and that's their job. That is what they were entrusted to do, as they've been given the responsibility and the authority to execute the task. Now, I'm mentioning these little buzzwords. Responsibility, authority. Now, what do we do to actually delegate? Well, I have another fun mnemonic for you guys. I know I have some really weird mnemonics, but this one is actually super helpful. I call it DAF. Ha! See? DAF! It makes sense. It's not quite spelled like Daffy Duck, but it's D-A-A-F, and we're going to talk about that. So first, you define what the task is. Simple enough, right? So let's say someone delegated to us that we needed to fly from this point to another point. Alright, so they're defining the task. They're saying, hey, fly from here to there. So then the second step is to assign the task. So we have been assigned that task to fly from that one point to another. Simple as that. And then the next part is authority. Assigning authority to that person, or giving them the authority to complete the task. So they take whatever actions they need to in order to get it done. So if we're flying and I have delegated to you, hey, I need us to fly from this point to this point, then you will do whatever you need to in order to make sure we're flying properly, and making sure the flight controls are set and everything, and checking the plane beforehand, and ensuring that we make the proper radio calls, all of that stuff. And I have entrusted that to you. You have the authority to make decisions involving that task. And then the last part would be to follow up. So when I follow up, I might ask you a few questions, say, hey, how are things going? I know we have that plan that we need to fly from here to here. Is there anything that I can help you with? And if we're in the plane itself flying, then I'll just check to see how you're doing, or if you have any questions about the process of what's going on. Now, you may not necessarily have enough experience to know what is needed for such a task, but it's just an example. And if you were an experienced pilot and we're doing a search and rescue mission, then it's a very good thing to know what you're doing and have that process of communication between both parties, with the leader and the follower, and being transparent about how things are going. There are a few common mistakes associated with delegation, and we're going to go over the ones that are in the Learn to Lead book. Now, there might be a few outside of those, but we're going to talk about the overarching ones. So the first one is unclear delegation. If you don't really discuss a clear process of DAF, So if you don't define the task, if you don't properly assign authority or assign the task to someone, and you don't follow up with them, then you need to be specific. You need to be specific about what it is, and you need to explain what your expectations are in order to make sure that that follower knows what they're expected to do. So in your classes, you might have an instructor that gives you a grading rubric when they give out an assignment. That is a clear set of expectations about what you are supposed to do for that task. So just make sure when you're delegating that you clear up anything associated with that task that you're delegating. Another thing is that some people supervise a little bit too closely. And when I say that, I mean, yes, you may have some very, very good intentions and ensuring that the follower is getting the task done. But once you've given that person the task, then they expect you to trust them with it. So if you look at all those steps, you've assigned them the authority to do it. And they're responsible for the task. And that's why you follow up with them, just kind of to check in at like a frequent basis, but not so much that they feel like they're overwhelmed by you constantly watching them. Because when you've given them a task, turn them loose. Let them do whatever they need to in order to get it done. And sometimes they might surprise you in coming up with a better way than you may have anticipated. So trust your people. That's a very important thing. And don't supervise too closely. So let's talk about the next portion of it. It's kind of associated with supervising a little bit too closely, but it's where the supervisor helps a little bit too much with the follower. Again, you've trusted that person to execute the task, and if they feel like they're capable, they should be able to do it on their own without too much assistance. Especially since you've given them the task and you're saying, here's the task, you can do it, and then constantly like helping them all the time. They're not really going to grow from the experience because you're almost doing it for them. So allow them to make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. We learn best from our failures. So allow followers to make mistakes that aren't going to be devastating. You can allow them to make mistakes as a follower. And then afterwards, if they approach you for help, then you can help them. And if there's something that they seem to be challenging with, you can offer assistance and say, hey, I understand that you might be having a few issues trying to teach this cadet drill over here. If there's any recommendations you would like, I'd be more than happy to help you out. Or asking them questions about how things are doing and then transitioning into helping them is a little bit better than just directly saying, I'm going to do this for you, this is what you're doing, while it's supposed to be kind of their task that they have ownership over. There's occasionally an issue when delegation is a little bit rushed. So delegation is a process that needs to be planned ahead of time. So if you give someone like an hour to plan something out, more times than not, they won't be able to complete the task as much as you would like them to, or they may really, really struggle with it because of such a time crunch. So you need to make sure that there's long-term planning ahead of time before you delegate a task out. People should not be surprised when a task is delegated to them, which is kind of part of that rushed delegation. Like they should know well in advance that they will be receiving such a task. And the last part of it is the improper selection of the person that's receiving the task. So I'm not going to ask someone who has never flown a plane before to fly from here across the Atlantic Ocean or across the Pacific Ocean. They have no experience and they probably will not succeed. So you need to pick someone who has enough experience in order to complete the task, and it should still be able to challenge them in certain areas, but it shouldn't be to the point where it's overwhelming and they will have no chance of completing the task. Now, why is it that sometimes people don't delegate? There are a few reasons. Sometimes people see it as taking too much time. You gotta follow up with them, you gotta help them a lot, and you've gotta show someone through the process of doing a task or what your expectations are. It just takes too long. Or another one is that, the other person, that person that I'm delegating to will make so many mistakes. No! Again, delegation is a great way to teach other people skills. So if you already know how to plan an activity, maybe let someone else try it out and then help them through that process and offer your assistance when it's appropriate. Another reason why people don't necessarily delegate is because they're afraid they might lose their job. So It may not necessarily be with like a volunteer organization. Well, sometimes it is. But, well, if one employee who's working at Chipotle is doing really, really well, and they're asked if they want a manager position, then that manager may not want to delegate as much to them because they don't want to be shown up. They want to be the top dog of that Chipotle. I don't necessarily work at Chipotle, but that is an example of why people may not delegate. The vital shift is basically, in the scheme of management, you transition from being a doer to a manager. So that's just a little definition that's in this section of the delegation in chapter 11, so it's just kind of something to be aware of and to know about. Just to summarize what we talked about today, we talked about what delegation is, which is basically just saying that someone, a subordinate, has the responsibility and the accountability to complete a task from their superior. Alright, and then we've got DAF, which is define, assign, authority, and follow up. So that's the process of the delegation process. There are a few places where delegation can be pretty challenging, and sometimes supervisors don't necessarily delegate properly. And so we talked about ways that we can overcome it and kind of move on. So don't forget to stay awesome, guys. I hope you are enjoying this Learn to Lead series, and if you have any questions for me, feel free to leave it in the comments down below. So thank you guys so much for watching, and that is all, folks. Until next time, toodles.